Hello everyone, Pulse here with some more World of Warcraft Warlords of Draenor discussion. In this video we're going to talk about the numerous changes occurring with the stats in the release of WoW's 5th expansion, including the removal of some of the older stats, the addition of some new ones, some potentially more interesting ones, and also the foreboding and forthcoming number crunch or item squish that Blizzard has been promising for quite some time now. But let's start with the actual stats getting the axe, the ones that are getting tossed out the window and into the trash. Hit, expertise, dodge, and parry. All four of these have been confirmed to be getting removed. They're being crushed out of existence and removed from the game that is World of Warcraft because they no longer fit the design philosophies for this game. Am I going to cry about it? Am I going to shed a tear? Absolutely not, because these were awful. These were archaic reminders of how old World of Warcraft actually is. Now these stats are getting removed because Blizzard has slowly migrated towards a state of thinking about secondary stats being more about the bonuses, the impact on the play. They want them to be more worthwhile, more impactful on your character, on you as a player, and less about being this annoying necessity that you have to work around. Now hit and expertise are getting the axe because they simply do nothing exciting and only provide a hindrance which you must work around, as I kind of said. Very, very frustrating most of the time. Now dodge and parry are getting removed, but mainly as a stat on gear. They will still appear as a thing which happens in the game. Tanks will still dodge and parry, so don't worry about that. But instead, you're going to gear more towards other secondary stats, and the dodge and parry stuff will just be part of the passives hidden away in your spec and that sort of thing. That's what's going to be the big thing hiding behind the curtain, as it were. Now tanking is going to be more about the management of cooldowns and proper active mitigation, and they've kind of taken the tanks toward this direction for a while now, so they're just really driving it home that they want tanks to be more active in their role in a party situation. Now let's talk about the other stats, the ones being added to the game. These new stats are coming into World of Warcraft and will be available in the form of tertiary stats that can appear on gear and don't seem to count towards the item budget, as it were. Now we don't really know a ton about these stats, but some of the examples that we got from BlizzCon for these tertiary stats were sturdiness. You don't lose durability on that piece of gear. You have speed, which is going to make your character move quicker, can stack with other speed buffs. We have the avoidance, which is going to reduce AoE damage taken, lifesteal, which is going to turn successful hits into HP gain, as you would expect, and then cleave, which is this extra AoE damage potential in the form of an on-hit proc, it seems. Now these are actually pretty cool, and I'm a little apprehensive as to where they fit in the whole grand scheme of things, but they seem really cool, and they kind of remind me of enchants almost, or maybe even talent points from a while ago before they did the whole talent tree rework and got away from the passives. That's what it really reminds me of, and I think it's really cool. As I've said a couple times here, I don't really know where they're going to fit in the whole system, but at first glance I would say I'm probably going to prefer this new system of primary stats sitting kind of on this upper tier above everything else. You're going to touch it very little, it's not going to have nearly as much hold on you, and secondary stats are going to carry much more weight, and then we'll have tertiary stats coming into the game kind of filling that role that secondary stats used to, where it's more about the tiny bonuses and the ability to kind of fiddle and personalize your character and optimize for your own gameplay and your own game style. That's pretty cool. I think that's what they're going for. I definitely want to know more about these tertiary stats, but right now I would say I'm probably going to like it over the current stats system. Now let's move on and focus on the changes occurring to enchanting and jewel crafting. Now both gems and enchants are still going to fulfill a significant role in gearing and customizing your character. However, they are going to be reduced, at least in the number available. Now what I mean by this is that enchanting will not be available for every piece of gear or every piece of armor as it is now, where it's nearly every piece of armor you have requires an enchant. And also, similar, gem slots are not going to be available on all pieces of gear either. There's going to be a drastic reduction in the number of gem slots available in your whole armor set. Now pretty much what this means is less pieces of armor to enchant and less gem slots to fill, but enchants and gems as a whole are going to provide a more interesting and kind of choice-provoking kind of thing, where you have to think about what you're actually going to put on your gear, and it's going to be a much more active choice based on your play style, your class, your spec, etc., etc. Now, it should be mentioned also that gem socket bonuses and meta gems are being removed from the game. So gems and enchants are both going to be this thing where you have very few of them to actually put on your gear now, but they're going to provide really interesting and I'm hoping innovative changes. They're going to do some pretty interesting stuff with gems and enchants, make them more interesting, much more than just the passive bonuses that most of them are now. Now, this is a pretty huge change, and one that I actually really like. Much like their decision to remove stats like hit and expertise, this change is being implemented to facilitate a much more choice-driven system of character customization, so that maybe in the end we'll only have, let's say, 5 gems and 3 enchant slots in total between your whole gear set. But with that small number of gem and enchant choices, they're all going to be much more interesting, and it's going to require some legitimate thought about which ones you would like to use, which ones do you think would be best for your current variation of the character. Also, another bonus that comes from this is a massive reduction in the amount of money, time, and effort it takes to put a new piece of gear into action, because normally what happens, for anyone that's played WoW now or in the past, knows you'll go into your raid, you'll get a new piece of gear, and you have to enchant, gem, reforge, so on and so forth, just to make a single piece of gear viable for your character. It's very tedious and frustrating, and this is going to help rectify that issue by streamlining things a bit. Now, speaking of changing armors, let's go ahead and discuss the new armor system, the new itemization that's going to happen with Warlords of Draenor, which is essentially the removal of primary stats from the gear when it drops, and instead primary stats will be given based on class and current spec when it's equipped. Essentially, what this is going to do is 2 really big things. One, no more completely useless raid drops based from stat distribution, such as having a good example here, Intellect Plate. When that drops, only paladins of the holy spec can use it. If you don't have that kind of player available in any form, be it a main spec or an off spec, that piece of gear went to waste. And similar situations happen all the time in this game. So this is going to make it so a lot less gear gets wasted because nobody can use it. The vast majority of the drops that occur during a raid are going to be picked up and utilized. This is a big bonus. Now, the second big thing this is going to do is drastically reduce the amount of farming required to make a viable offset of gear for your secondary spec. By extension, this is also going to make it much easier to actually utilize the dual spec system in dungeons and raids. This is something that already gets a lot of usage. This is just going to make it easier, much more streamlined, which is kind of what they're doing throughout this expansion, it seems. They're really streamlining things, refocusing back to the idea that frustrating does not equal fun. Work does not equal fun. Let's make it a little bit more user-friendly. Let's get into it. But there's one issue I want to talk about with this, but I'll get into it as we discuss reforging, because it does correlate fairly well with that topic. Now, reforging is getting removed. It's being removed from WoW as we know it. Blizzard apparently feels that it only provides another necessity, pretty much. It provides this extra thing you have to do in the preparation phases and the character customization phases of the game, instead of actually giving something fun and worthwhile and interesting to the player. Now, obviously, the logic with this from Blizzard's point of view is that reforging was meant to give players some customization, but instead it's really just become this band-aid fix for players to use in order to get around hit and expertise caps in similar situations. Now, it seems fine to me, this logic, it really does. However, reforging did actually provide a nice system of customization outside of those stats, and with those stats being removed, it seems a little bit weird that they would remove the customization, because wouldn't it now, with those stats removed, fulfill its original role for an extra tool of player customization for yourself and the math side of things? Well, yes and no. This kind of connects back to what I was saying about the primary stat changes on the spec. Now, there's been no mention of secondary stat automatically changing based on spec, and it has people worried about the optimization thing, because a lot of different specs, a lot of different stat prioritizations are in this game, and it varies greatly based on your class and spec. And just a quick example so that we're all kind of on the same page. If I play my shaman, for example, and he's an elemental spec, I might want to prioritize mastery, haste, and crit in that order of importance. But then my restoration spec, maybe it prioritizes haste to a specific cap, and then mastery and crit in that order. Now the question everyone asking then is, if the stat prioritization is still different between specs, why remove reforging when it would help rectify this? Well, I came up with this kind of twofold answer, right? First off, the system of reforging doesn't actually benefit what they're building now. It doesn't actually benefit the implementation of having one armor set work for all specs available in all classes. It doesn't actually add anything interesting to the character customization part of the game, and instead it would just resume being this band-aid fix for poor itemization. While it does provide that sense of customization, it also gets in the way of, as I said, having one armor go for the whole thing, because what would happen is you'd reforge for one spec, but when you switch, if it's not going to switch the secondary stats anyway, why would it change the reforged stats? You see what I'm saying here? It doesn't really make sense for them to implement reforging until they've gotten the secondary stat automatically changing, which it doesn't seem to be the case anyway, so it doesn't really make sense for them to implement reforging. I'll definitely miss it, because it does definitely appeal to my theory crafting, the theory crafter in me, the MMO mathematician that really wants to squeeze out every point of DPS they can. But when I think about it, it really just doesn't make sense for them to keep it, at least until they make a lot more changes to the way that the gear itemization is going to work. I feel like this is actually something that they're doing correctly. It's gonna have some growing pains, and just like a lot of us in the game, there's a lot more that people are going to have to get used to, but this is on the right track, I feel. This is getting removed. It's a huge part of the stat system as we currently know it, but I feel it's probably for the best. Now, speaking of balance and the itemization of things, let's get into the item squish, which is finally upon us, and by God, it's a travesty. It's the end of the world. My head has exploded. Toilets everywhere are bursting into flame when you try to use them, and I was just mauled by a cat that came out of my monitor when I hit M to look at my map. No, none of that is true. If you thought it was, you might need to see a doctor. But to be honest, guys, this is a good thing. I know so many people are against it. There's so many crazy vocal people out there that just don't want this. Now, I've mentioned before how it's going to be jarring. That cannot be denied. It's going to be jarring to see your numbers go from 1 million to 100. But it's going to fix so many issues, guys. It's going to fix so many things on Blizzard's end, namely the servers and the chat log and just the programming side of things. It's going to make some really good changes. It's going to make it so that visually we see a different number, but in the end we're not killing any mobs slower than we used to. We're not getting nerfed. That's not what's happening. We're just getting crunched. We're getting squished, as it were. That's why it's named that. The speed at which we kill a mob will stay the same. It's not going to affect the way that we level. It's not going to affect the amount of DPS percentage-wise that we do. It's not going to affect how we run older content, if you're into that sort of thing. There's really no reason to get upset over the number shrinking a tiny bit. I see why some people are going to have issues, because there's so many people that just have this, I am uber powerful, I need to be super powerful, my EP is growing, I need to fuel it. But honestly, that number doesn't do anything. If you find relevance in a number, I'm sorry, but that's not actually an accomplishment. Your accomplishment in the game would be completing challenging content, the content that's high and tough and presented to you in the game. I mean, if just think of it this way, getting to say, hey friends, hey guys, hey guildies, I did this 99 billion damage crit the other day, but it doesn't mean shit if it's under like ludicrous conditions provided by buff stacking or just the crazy out of whack gear scaling that's going on. It doesn't actually, there's no relevance there. There's nothing there to actually give satisfaction and make people say wow. Instead, if you get to say, hey guys, my guild, we downed this crazy ass complicated boss yesterday on the hardest difficulty, and I even earned this super awesome item I've been trying to get for a while, and I can just do all this other stuff, and that just gives way more I don't know, it just has more meaning. It holds much more water than a random and out of context number like my trillion billion dollar critical hit or whatever. I mean, I'm super happy with this, to be honest, and I know Blizzard is as well. They've probably been sweating their asses off trying to figure out how to best implement this without their whole system melting down. But as with a lot of features, as I kind of mentioned, the item Squish is going to have some growing pains. I mean, the thing is here, this is what you have to think about. Are you confident in your skills in a player to not require a random ass number popping up on your screen to convince you that you are playing right, that you are having a good time and killing the mob? Because the speed isn't going to change, the damage percentage-wise isn't going to change, your spot on the DPS meters, if that's where you're about, is not going to change. None of that is going to change. And I hope most people feel the same as well. It's not about that stupid-ass number, it's about the challenge, the content, and the friends you did it with. That's what's important, not your dumbass number. So stop having a conniption over a number. It's going to be the same percentage-wise, so chill your grill, man. But I think that's going to do it for me on this episode of Warlords of Draenor something. I'm still working on a proper title, which I need to ask you guys now, I suppose, is do you want or desire a full WoW show of sorts? Warlords of Draenor looks like a huge step in the right direction, at least to me, and I've even started playing WoW a little bit, which I've been away for years now. I started playing again, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it, actually. They've done a lot to improve the questing and stuff, and I'm actually having a good time playing it. Me and my girlfriend are just, every now and then, when we get a chance, we play it, having a good time, and it's made me consider adding a WoW show to the lineup of content already going out on the channel. So let me know what you guys think. Do you want to hear me ramble about WoW some more? If not, just whatever, let me know. I'll finish up the BlizzCon stuff, and then I'll move on to other endeavors. But thanks again so much for watching, guys. It's really appreciated, honestly, when you guys watch and give the comments, and when you subscribe, and comment down below, and share with your friends, and all that good stuff that I always tell you to do at the end of these videos. It's super appreciated. So I'd hug you, I guess, if I could. But since we can't, I'll just say, give me a comment down below on whatever you're thinking about, or whatever your mind can conjure up, I suppose. But thanks again for watching, and I will see you on the next one, guys. Bye.